Another edition of Cuse Connections underway. Brian Higgins with you. As you know, I'm in my basement. John Wildhack, the athletic director, with us. It looks, John, if I'm looking right, that you're in your office at Manley Fieldhouse right now.
Brian, I'm in my office, and your basement looks really good. Nice job on the modeling.
Yeah, there we go. We had to class it up a little bit for these last few months down here. And John, the reason we talked to you this week is big news has happened here in the last few days. Wednesday afternoon, the ACC announcing at least a plan here upcoming for the fall, mainly for football, but the other sports as well. I know you as the athletic directors met earlier this week, Tuesday. The chancellors and presidents talked yesterday. In your mind, how did all of that go to arrive at what we heard on Wednesday?
You know, it's Brian. The announcement on Wednesday was the result really of months of work that the athletic directors undertook, the conference office undertook, the senior women's administrators undertook. So was and the presidents and the chancellors in terms of conversations and meetings that we had with them individually and that they had collectively is the leadership group of the conference. And what it really does, it creates, it defines a path and a timing for that path to play fall sports, and not only football, but it's also very important for our Olympic sports is they are part of yesterday's announcement, and we want to compete, and we plan to compete in all fall sports. And again, yesterday creates a path to do so and gives a sense of timing and how we'll do it.
I'd say a path is kind of maybe one of the more important words that you said, and that was in what came from the ACC, because it's not an obstacle-free path, even though that it is laid out there now. How challenging, I guess, is the next month now to get to, or month plus until we get to that week of the 10th and the 12th when competition in theory can begin, and then beyond there of sort of keeping it on the path and getting these games played?
Well, it's a reflection of our society, right? It's going to be challenging for everyone, for all 15 schools. And, I think one of the things that our region has done here in Central New York is we've done a fantastic job, dealing with the pandemic, heeding the advice of medical experts, medical professionals, wearing the mask, social distancing. So I think a lot of this, frankly, comes down to one word, and that's going to be discipline. Mm-hmm. And discipline that our student athletes have to have, that our coaching staffs have to have, and that we as an athletic staff have to have. So we've got to be incredibly disciplined. You supplement that with a very specific testing protocol and medical protocol, which was devised by the ACC Medical Advisory Group. And again, it creates a path and hopefully an opportunity to play. But we're excited that we've taken this step forward.
Well, you know this, Sean, the last time we saw any Syracuse sporting event, I mean, we're going back now to March 11th, that Wednesday night in Greensboro. So it's been more than 4 months now. And you could have made a plan in April or May or June or whatever, and probably would have had to crumple it up and start again. How tough was this in the idea that stuff has changed? I mean, literally stuff changes day to day to day, and it's been doing that for 4 months at a rate that I don't think we've ever seen before.
You just, you need the ability to adapt and really adapt, not on a daily basis. Sometimes it's an hourly basis, right? And, there are days when you hear news, which is promising, right? There are days you hear news that, are not all that promising. Obviously, if you look nationally, the rate of infection has increased dramatically in certain states. The most sobering number is we surpassed over 150,000 people in this country who succumbed to coronavirus. So we understand the environment and the challenges of the environment that we're working with and dealing with.
Well, we know our state in New York went through what hopefully turns out to be our toughest times back in March and April. We see Florida now, a state that houses multiple ACC teams, is going through basically that right now. And you mentioned the day-to-day. When you put together this plan, I know there was lots of talk leading up to this, and then you see Major League Baseball. They get out there on the field last week, and then the news with the Miami Marlins basically having to shut it down. Cubs out, Sunday, Monday? Well, you guys, I'm sure, were deep in these conversations. Right. How does stuff like that, I guess, affect how you dealt with things as the ACC and the leadership group of the ACC?
Well, I think that we keep a watchful eye on what's going around the country and also globally. So we've kept an eye in terms of what the NBA is has done, what the WNBA has done, MLS, NASCAR, because they travel on a weekly basis. PGA Tours travel on a weekly basis. Obviously, Major League Baseball. And I think a key part of what the plan was again, the medical advisory group, which was comprised of a number of incredibly talented and professional people representing each school in the conference. Brad Pike was our representative, and a real protocol, testing protocol that we feel comfortable with, that does everything possible to protect the health of not only our student athletes, but also our staffs as well. But also knowing that as you go through this, there will be hurdles, there will be obstacles, there will be incidents. That's one reason with football on the schedule, and I was on the subcommittee, is we try to build in as much flexibility as we possibly could. Play 11 games over 13 weeks. There could be, a week where a number of schools aren't able to play. There could be a week where potentially all 15 can't play. We don't know. So you try to build in as much flexibility as you possibly can.
Let's get into the football idea. How was the idea of the 10+1 model, I guess we're calling it, where there will be 10 league games and then you have the option of playing one non-conference game as well? How did you arrive at that number as opposed to something smaller, or was that just to allow the maximum flexibility?
I think that the 10+1 is aspirational, right? That's kind of the max. So we want, hey, let's build that model. If we need to contract that, you can. If we need to go to an 8+1, et cetera. But let's start with the 10+1. The +1, what really drove that is we've got 4 intra-conference rivalries with SEC schools, right? Clemson, South Carolina, Florida, Florida State, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Kentucky. Those games are important to those schools, important to those states. Also is the 10+1 model gives everybody the chance to play a non-conference opponent, to play them at home, to give you 6 home games. It also helps fulfill the obligations we have with ESPN in terms of our media agreement. So that's what we coalesced around, again, after tremendous conversation, very in-depth conversation amongst the ADs that were on that subcommittee and the 3 head football coaches, Dabo Sweeney, Dave Clausen, and Mike Norvell.
As far as Syracuse, are there any plans for that +1 game yet, or is it still too early in the process?
We're finalizing now. We do have, we have a previous agreement with the host Liberty this year. We'll reach out, have conversations with them in terms of A, whether they're going to play, B, part of, if we decided to play them, they'd have to agree to the protocol, medical protocol, the ACC. Liberty has 3 games with ACC schools this year. They're at Virginia Tech, they're at North Carolina State, and they're at us. So, the fact that they play 3 ACC opponents, I think would incent them to adhere to the medical testing minimal guidelines.
I'd say one thing I noticed, and you said it, speed bumps will happen at some point, and who knows what that's going to be when we get into September, October, November, and beyond. Something that was noticeable in what the ACC put out is the idea that the conference championship game is going to be between the teams with the 2 highest winning percentages. That seemed very notable to me anyway, that the word percentage was used as opposed to the best record. So that seems to have already built in the idea that having to get everybody through a full season is maybe not necessarily the major goal right now, is to just get it on track and then see where it goes from there.
Yeah, and there may be teams that can't play 11 games. Maybe they only play 9 games, but if they go 8-1 and they had 2 games that they couldn't play because their opponents were not in a position to play, we felt it's not fair to unduly penalize them because they were in a situation of where they could play, but their opponents couldn't.
When you look at the 10 games right now, none of them have landed on specific days yet. Right. When do you expect that information to be put out there? And how tough is that to put together a new schedule like this on the fly?
Well, Michael Strickland is Michael. He's the master scheduler in football for the conference. Michael's done a great job. He was part of the football subcommittee, obviously, and a huge contributor. So it'll take him probably a week to 2 weeks to put that kind of date-specific schedule together.
So we'll wait and see what happens on that. And then I guess it looks like, John, the weekend of September 12th is the target start date for the whole league right now.
Yeah, and we did agree with that. We thought Labor Day might be a little too aggressive. We wanted to let campuses welcome their student body back on campus, right? Give everybody the chance to acclimate in a larger environment. And again, knowing that we had the flexibility in the back end, right, to play the championship game as late as December 19th and to contract from 12 games to 11. We thought starting September 12th was the most prudent thing to do.
For football, and this goes for all the sports, right now, essentially, give or take, all of the fall athletes are back on campus and brought back through the various testing protocols and are doing workouts within their teams and small groups right now. But you mentioned it. At some point, other students will be back on not just Syracuse's campus, but all these campuses in some volume of numbers, maybe smaller than before, but more than they are right now. How much does that have to play into it, where this is not a bubble situation like the NBA? That's impossible. That you need to see just what exactly, I guess, is going to happen in the first few weeks of everyone being back on campus.
Right, and that's where I think the discipline is so important that I mentioned earlier. Is you're right, it can't be a bubble. Our kids go to class, right? They're student athletes, so they're going to go to class. But again, I think the wearing of masks, the protocol that the universities put in place, in-person instruction will be socially distanced, right? It's avoiding large gatherings, and you see what happened at Rutgers. Yesterday, I think it was announced, 15 players or whatever, and, if they were in an off-campus party, you can't do that. You've got to do everything you can to mitigate the risk. You can't eliminate the risk. None of us can. Can't eliminate it totally. We can mitigate it some by how we act and how we conduct ourselves. And again, following the basic guidelines of you wear the mask, appropriate social distancing, good hygiene, you wash your hands frequently. And if you do things like that, again, that's a way to minimize the risk.
Notre Dame appeared to be an important cog in putting this whole thing together, where we know this, they prize their independence in football. They've been a part of the same league for everything else as Syracuse going back to the mid-90s with the Big East and now in the ACC. How did that part come together where Notre Dame will be a league football member this year and they'll be splitting their NBC money and the whole deal? And is there anything to read into the future of that as maybe a test run for down the line?
I wouldn't read anything into the future on that, Brian. And I think people have been a little quick to do so. This is a unique and special circumstance. And Notre Dame lost games when the Pac-12 stated they were going to go to conference only, when the Big Ten stated they were going to go to conference only, right? So Notre Dame, they needed help in terms of filling out their schedule. They've been really good partner to the conference in the sports in which they're full member. So I think it was the right opportunity for both entities. The ACC had the ability to assist Notre Dame in giving them a highly competitive schedule and to get them to 10 games. Notre Dame agreed to come in as a full member in football this year, and obviously part of that was the NBC media money, which certainly helps. It's not a game changer for any of us, but it helps, and it's only right that if the ACC is going to help Notre Dame in terms of filling out a full schedule form as they contribute their media rights as well.
And also, this is through necessity, it's a one division season. We've grown used to the two divisions in the Coastal and the Atlantic. Was there any discussion about that being more than a 1 year kind of thing?
No, not yet. And I say not yet because I think potentially down the road that may come up for discussion. I think it'll be interesting to see how one division, 15 schools, plays out this year, how it's perceived by our fans. So that it could open the door to conversations of revising the current scheduling model down the road. I'm personally, I'm not a big fan of the fact that we host Miami once every 12 years,
right, in
football, and Virginia Tech, they host us once every 12. That doesn't make sense to me. If we're part of a conference, intuitively, I think we should play each other more frequently. Now, that's easier said than done because, all right, how do you build schedule models? You need rivalry games. You need to keep intact, et cetera, that type of thing. But I think we'll see the results of one division this year, and that may be the impetus for conversation down the road.
So I got my own personal math on how that can work out. We'll leave that for another day of how everyone could play at every school during a 4-year career. But John, in the safety,
there is a way to do that, Brian. Your math is correct.
Yes, if anyone can divide by 4, they can figure things out on how you can get everyone to every school in the ACC in 4 years. But that's a thing for another time. Because John, I think the biggest thing of all this is the safety of everyone involved. And there's stuff that is out of the university's hands in many ways. As being in New York State right now, there are not travel bans, but quarantine situations between the state and 30 plus other states right now, which comprises most of the ACC. How is that handled, or do your testing protocols make the athletes, if they have to travel to these road games in North Carolina or Florida or Georgia or wherever, does that meet the limits to go and come back to New York State?
We're confident that our testing protocols will meet the standards, and the health and safety of everybody, our student athletes and our staff, is of paramount importance. And there's a carve out for professional sports in New York, as you see with Major League Baseball, as you see with the NFL, et cetera, that type of thing. And I think we can make a strong and compelling case that given the testing, the frequency of the testing that we're doing, the daily surveillance that we're doing, that we can satisfy the concerns of anyone.
How hard is this? Where, I mean, most of these league games, it is, be it a charter or commercial, it's for all these sports. It's, you got to get on a plane, you go on the road, you're staying in a hotel somewhere, and you're playing in a place that has not been part of the environment you're in, which, any other year is you just do it, you don't really think about it. Where this year there's a lot more, I guess, that goes into it. How tough is it to plan for all of that stuff on short notice here this year?
Well, for our football operations directors, it's going to be a real challenge for us. But when we go on the road, and you've obviously been with us, it's like a bubble. Mm-hmm. You get on the plane, you get off the plane, you go to the hotel, you stay at the hotel until you leave to go to the game the next day. The game's played, you go to the airport, you fly home. The Olympic sports, the model for the fall is heavily centered on regional competition. So it can be bus versus commercial air travel. So that was one of the paramount goals for fall Olympic sports is let's minimize the air travel and maximize bus trips. And again, once you're at the hotel, it's a very controlled environment, and particularly this year, even in the past, we might go out and do donor dinners or something like that on Friday night. That's not going to happen. We get to the hotel. The entire travel party, in my mind, we're all going to be quarantined at that hotel until we leave for the game the next day.
I'll say this, if you're on one of those groups, and that's not just Syracuse and any team, you do not want to be the person that goes out and does something stupid and then ruins the rest of the season. I mean, that's essentially what can happen if somebody goes and does something wrong at that point. You mentioned the Olympic sports, John. There's ACC minimums, it looks like, going on with these sports, or NCAA minimums, I think, of right. How many games they got to play. Field hockey and the soccer teams have to play at least 6 games. Volleyball 10, and cross country seems to be at the liberty to schedule meets as necessary. How are those sports handling things right now?
Yeah, I think we've got a schedule model built in place, for the Olympic sports in terms of home and away for the ACC competitions. And each school, you have the ability to add to that schedule with non-conference competition, mm-hmm. which we'll to do. Again, the key point there is it's not only who we're playing, but making sure that they adhere to our testing protocols.
So we'll see how it all goes here as we get into it. And even if it all goes great, there could be athletes or coaches that either through medical reasons or just feeling uncomfortable don't feel safe with it. How do you handle somebody that says, you know what, this is just not for me this year? How do you handle an athlete or coach that gets put in a spot where even with the best intentions, they don't want to be a part of something like that this year.
And if an athlete or a coach wants to opt out, we're going to let them do that. And if a athlete and they're on scholarship or aid and they want to opt out, they're going to retain that scholarship or the aid that they're receiving. And one of the things that our coaches did is before we brought anybody back to campus, they had Zoom meetings with not only their student athletes, but also the parents of their student athletes to make sure that the parents were comfortable, sending their daughters or sons back to campus. And each coach talked to their team too. And they've told each student athlete, hey, if you're uncomfortable and you don't want to come back, you don't have to come back. Or if you come back and you want to opt out, you can opt out. And I think we've already seen in one case, a cornerback, I think from Virginia Tech, opt out. Now he's projected to be a high NFL draft pick. So it's not so much, the fear of playing. It's more preserving as he looks towards his future. But we're not going to, if anybody doesn't want to play or anybody doesn't want to coach, we're going to be supportive of that. And we should be supportive.
As far as our fan base, right now anyway, you're not allowed to host fans at sporting events in the state of New York, but that could change at some point. How have you handled things with certainly football season ticket holders first off, then looking down the line at basketball?
Yeah, we tried to be communicative with our season ticket holders and keep them updated. And you're right. Right now, no fans, but that doesn't mean the door is shut as we look towards September, October, and November. So we continue to build models for limited capacity seating in the stadium, in the dome, and we hope we have the opportunity to do that. But again, part of getting to that point is everybody continuing to adhere to the medical guidelines, the discipline, right? The wear the mask again, which this community has done. Century New York's done a fantastic job. Anytime I go anywhere, people are wearing their mask. And again, every medical expert has said, wearing the mask helps mitigate the virus. So the best opportunity to have fans in the dome is to continue the discipline that the people have adopted over the past 3.5, 4 months.
And speaking of looking forward, men's and women's basketball, I know they're back on campus and getting into their workouts. What kind of timetable would you need if there do need to be alterations, I guess, to those schedules down the line as you've done here with football?
Well, I think that'll be one of the next things that the AD group begins to tackle is let's look towards the winter sports. And obviously the two most prominent are men's and women's basketball. And all right, what do we think we can do? Can we slide the schedule back? Can we build flexibility into the basketball schedule as we did the football schedule? We've already talked about how do you minimize air travel for men's and women's basketball. I mean, this year, men's basketball, we play all 4 Carolina schools on the road. Mm-hmm. That shouldn't be 4 separate trips, right? You can do 2 trips and play 2 games, play a Saturday, Monday, or a Wednesday, Saturday, or whatever. So again, try to minimize the air travel where you can. Women's basketball went to kind of a regional pod last year. So that will help in that regard. And then I think also is the NCAA tournament. And what Dan Gavin, who runs men's basketball for the NCAA, what does he and the NCAA think in terms about, all right, conducting the tournament on its scheduled dates now? So that's going to be part of the conversation as well. So just like with football and the fall Olympic sports, there's going to be a tremendous amount of work and thought that has to go into the winter sports as well.
All right, John, just about out of time here. So lastly, anything else, I guess, that we should know about things to keep an eye on here in the next few months as we are all in untreaded waters right now?
Well, Brian, I really appreciate the support of our alumni, of our fan base, of our community. I'm really proud of our student athletes who are back on campus because, again, we have a very, very detailed protocol And we've told them they have to follow it, and they're doing a really good job of it. So I'm proud of them as well. And we just, we're going to continue to work on the opportunity to give our student athletes, our coaches, the opportunity to compete. Obviously, we'll be cognizant of health issues locally, regionally, around the country. And again, I think discipline is, if we want to have sports, not only college sports, but if we want to have sports in this country in the fall and the winter, I think discipline is the key word for all of us.
Well, John, anyone watching this, I think, wants to have sports. So hopefully everyone heeds that advice. And it's fun that we at least got a target in mind now for what to look forward to. So thanks so much here for a few minutes.
Brian, my pleasure. Thank you.